I would like to take a moment to talk to my generation, those of you who were born somewhere between 1960 and 1980. Right now, you're entering your 40s and or 50s. I want to talk to you because this information is specifically for you. So if you're outside of that demographic, you can stick around and listen and perhaps send this information to someone that could benefit from it. But did you know that 31% of adolescents with divorced parents dropped out of high school, compared to 13% of children with families still intact? Did you also know that 33% of adolescent girls of divorced parents became teen moms compared to 11% of girls from continuously married families? And I know you're probably saying that though you were a product of divorced parents, you did not drop out of high school. You probably went on to college to obtain a degree, and you're doing fine. But you're not the rule; you are the exception. And you're probably saying that you were not a teen mom, and these statistics don't pertain to you. But if you just hang around for a minute, we'll connect the dots, and then we'll see where you fit into this. Did you know that 11% of boys who come from divorced families end up spending time in prison before age 32, compared to 5% of boys from homes still intact? The reason why I want to talk to individuals from my generation, they call us Generation X. There's something unique about us because we were the first generation born post the divorce revolution of the 1970s. I want to remind you that it was in 1969, then Governor Ronald Reagan, who later became President Ronald Reagan, he signed the very first no-fault divorce bill in the state of California, and subsequent states followed that legislation, and this ushered in the divorce revolution of the 1970s. Can you tell me that that legislation did not have some side effect on us as children, especially when you consider that there were no programs in place to help us make the transition? What I'm suggesting to you is that we are a unique generation in that we were the first generation post civil rights movement, the first generation post the divorce revolution, and it is difficult for me to say from an intellectual standpoint that there were no effects, long-term effects on our generation specifically, even today. 45 years later, we're talking about relationships. We're talking about our inabilities to connect and develop meaningful relationships. We seem to have problems with commitment and trust. What are the effects on us 45 years later, socially, psychologically, and emotionally? Did you know that sociologist Paul Amato, he's a professor at Penn State University, he estimates that if family stability today was as it was in 1960, our nation would have 750,000 fewer children repeating grades, 1.2 million fewer school suspensions, approximately 500,000 fewer acts of teenage delinquency, about 600,000 fewer kids receiving therapy, and about 70,000 fewer suicides. I say this because if there's a disconnect with our generation 45 years later, then we need to start making the connection with the fact that we were the very first generation post the 1970s divorce revolution, and the marriage rate, or let me say the divorce rate, is higher with our age group than any other. Coincident? I think not. How were we affected as children? Where were the programs while this was going on in the 1970s? What are the ill effects, even today, on you, psychologically, emotionally, and otherwise? Let's get together at our very first hashtag relationships live event. We're calling it hashtag relationships registry and forum. I want to see your face. I want to look you in the eye and share this information with you. And let's see if we can come to terms on why is it that our generation, our age group, why are we struggling so much with relationships in our 40s and 50s? 45 years later, the results are in. I have the statistics in front of me. Did you know that Governor Ronald Reagan, he said that signing the no-fault divorce bill of 1969 was the biggest mistake that he has ever made in his entire political life, or at least one of them. Now, that's not to place the blame squarely on Governor Reagan. We have some say as to what is the outcome of our lives, and I think for the majority of us, we played the hand that we were dealt. But you cannot honestly say that there were no hidden effects. And we're seeing the effects in our inabilities to connect with one another these days, while in our 40s, late 40s, and even in our 50s. It's hashtag relationship registry and forum. You don't want to miss it. We're coming at you this summer. We have to have the entire conversation.